We turned down a narrow lane, then through a still narrower one which terminated at a courtyard. Entering a tall building, we climbed up 5 flights of stairs to a landing, where one of the scouts kicked open a door into a room so miserable that there was not even a lock to protect its poverty. Here they allowed the insensible Simard to drop with a crash on the floor. Thus they left us alone without even an adieu. The Apaches take care of their own after a fashion. I struck a match, and found part of a bougie stuck in the mouth of an absinthe bottle, resting on a rough deal table. Lighting the bougie, I surveyed this horrible apartment. A heap of rags lay in a corner, and this was evidently Simard's bed. I hauled him to it, and there he lay unconscious, himself a bundle of rags. I found one chair, or rather stool, for it had no back. I drew the table against the lockless door, blew out the light, sat on the stool, resting my arms on the table and my head on my arms, and slept peacefully till long after daybreak. Simard awoke in the worst possible humour. He poured forth a great variety of abusive epithets at me. To make himself still more agreeable, he turned back the rags on which he had slept, and brought to the light a round black object, like a small cannon ball, which he informed me was the picric bomb that was to scatter destruction among my English friends, for whom he expressed the greatest possible loathing and contempt. Then, sitting up, he began playing with this infernal machine, knowing as well as I that if he allowed it to drop, that was the end of us two. I shrugged my shoulders at this display, and affected a nonchalance I was far from feeling, but finally put an end to his dangerous amusement by telling him that if he came out with me I would pay for his breakfast and give him a drink of absinthe. The next few days were the most anxious of my life. Never before had I lived on terms of intimacy with a picric bomb, that most deadly and uncertain of all explosive agencies. I speedily found that Simard was so absinthe-soaked I could do nothing with him. He could not be bribed, or cajoled, or persuaded, or threatened. Once, indeed, when he talked with drunken affection of Eugene Valmont, I conceived a wild notion of declaring myself to him, but a moment's reflection showed the absolute uselessness of this course. It was not one Simard with whom I had to deal, but half a dozen or more. There was Simard, sober, half sober, quarter sober, drunk, half drunk, quarter drunk, or wholly drunk. Any bargain I might make with the one Simard would not be kept by any of the other 6. The only safe Simard was Simard insensible through over-indulgence. I had resolved to get Simard insensibly drunk on the morning of the procession, but my plans were upset at a meeting of the anarchists, which luckily took place on an evening shortly after my arrival, and this gave me time to mature the plan which was actually carried out. Each member of the anarchist club knew of Simard's slavery to absinthe, and fears were expressed that he might prove incapable on the day of the procession, too late for a substitute to take his place. It was therefore proposed that 1 or 2 others should be stationed along the route of the procession with bombs ready if Simard failed. This I strenuously opposed, and guaranteed that Simard would be ready to launch his missile. I met with little difficulty in persuading the company to agree, because, after all, every man among them feared he might be one of those selected, which choice was practically a sentence of death. I guaranteed that the bomb would be thrown, and this apparently was taken to mean that if Simard did not do the deed, I would. This danger over, I next took the measurements and estimated the weight of the picric bomb. I then sought out a most amiable and expert pyrotechnist, a capable workman of genius, who with his own hand makes those dramatic firework arrangements which you sometimes see in Paris. As Eugene Valmont, I had rendered a great service to this man, and he was not likely to have forgotten it. During one of the anarchist scares a stupid policeman had arrested him, and when I intervened the man was just on the verge of being committed for life. France trembled in one of her panics. or rather Paris did, and demanded victims. This blameless little workman had indeed contributed with both material and advice, but any fool might have seen that he had done this innocently. His assistance had been invoked and secured under the pretence that his clients were promoting an amateur firework display, which was true enough, but the display cost the lives of 3 men, and intentionally so. I cheered up the citizen in the moment of his utmost despair, and brought such proof of his innocence to the knowledge of those above me that he was most reluctantly acquitted. To this man I now went with my measurement of the bomb and the estimate of its weight. 'Sir,' said I, 'do you remember Eugene Valmont?' 'Am I ever likely to forget him?' he replied with a fervour that pleased me. 'He has sent me to you, and implores you to aid me, and that aid will wipe out the debt you owe him.' 'Willingly, willingly,' cried the artisan, 'so long as it has nothing to do with the anarchists or the making of bombs.' 'It has to do exactly with those 2 things. I wish you to make an innocent bomb which will prevent an anarchist outrage.' At this the little man drew back, and his face became pale. 'It is impossible,' he protested. 'I have had enough of innocent bombs. No, no. And in any case, how can I be sure you come from Eugene Valmont? No, monsieur, I am not to be trapped the second time.' At this I related rapidly all that Valmont had done for him, and even repeated Valmont's most intimate conversation with him. The man was nonplussed, but remained firm. 'I dare not do it,' he said. We were alone in his back shop. I walked to the door and thrust in the bolt, then after a moment's pause turned round, stretched forth my right hand dramatically, and cried, 'Behold, Eugene Valmont!' My friend staggered against the wall in his amazement, and I continued in solemn tones, 'Eugene Valmont, who by this removal of his disguise places his life in your hands, as your life was in his. Now, monsieur, what will you do?' He replied, 'Monsieur Valmont, I shall do whatever you ask. If I refused a moment ago, it was because I thought there was now in France no Eugene Valmont to rectify my mistake if I made one. I resumed my disguise, and told him I wished an innocent substitute for this picric bomb, and he at once suggested an earthenware globe, which would weigh the same as the bomb, and which could be coloured to resemble it exactly. 'And now, Monsieur Valmont, do you wish smoke to issue from this imitation bomb?' 'Yes,' I said, 'in such quantity as you can compress within it.' 'It is easily done,' he cried, with the enthusiasm of a true French artist. 'And may I place within some little design of my own which will astonish your friends the English and delight my friends the French?' 'Monsieur,' said I am in your hands. I trust the project entirely to your skill.' And thus it came about that 4 days later I substituted the bogus globe for the real one, and, unseen, dropped the picric bomb from one of the bridges into the Seine. On the morning of the procession I was compelled to allow Simard several drinks of absinthe to bring him up to a point where he could be depended on, otherwise his anxiety and determination to fling the bomb, his frenzy against all government, made it certain that he would betray both of us before the fateful moment came. My only fear was that I could not stop him drinking when once he began, but somehow our days of close companionship, loathsome as they were to me, seemed to have had the effect of building up again the influence I held over him in former days, and his yielding more or less to my wishes appeared to be quite unconscious on his part. The procession was composed entirely of carriages, each containing 4 persons. 2 Englishmen sat on the back seats, with 2 Frenchmen in front of them. A thick crowd lined each side of the thoroughfare, cheering vociferously. Right into the middle of the procession Simard launched his bomb. There was no crash of explosion. The missile simply went to pieces as if it were an earthenware jar, and there arose a dense column of very white smoke. In the immediate vicinity the cheering stopped at once, and the sinister word "bomb" passed from lip to lip in awed whispers. As the throwing had been unnoticed in the midst of the commotion, I held Simard firmly by the wrist,